He didn't know I was going to tell you this, but he's a man that is about community. There's been several times that he has taken his son and gotten the color of the walls of the 15 freeway and paints over graffiti. He cares about his city. He cares about California. Please welcome Dr. Dan Erikson. All right.
Thank you guys for having us. David and Jennifer have been sweet friends. Our daughters met a couple years ago, and we started to get to know them, and I feel like I know this church a little bit just because I know the kind of people you produce. So high-quality individuals. And I was thinking this morning, I was preparing questions for Anthony, and I was thinking, what is the key to right now? There's so much confusion. There's so many crazy things happening. And this verse kept coming into my mind today. Maybe you guys have heard John 14:6 before. But Jesus speaking said, I am the way. Have you guys watched The Mandalorian? This is the way. There's a lot of people telling us what the way is right now, right? The medical field is saying this is the way. The Mandalorians are telling us this is the way. The governments are telling us this is the way. And I'm thinking to myself, Jesus is the way. Like, y'all don't know the way. Our way is lost. Our leaders are lost. And so this verse that says, I am the way, I am the truth. The truth has never been harder to find. I don't know if you guys feel that or not. I'm always looking for truth in the medical field. I have never seen so many red herrings and confusion amongst my peers. And Jesus said, I am the truth. If you are wondering where the truth is, get into your word. That is where the truth is. It's not on Google. It's not on DuckDuckGo. It's in your word. Get in that book. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. Life is being attacked from inception in the womb right now to COVID deaths, where we were suppressing early therapy. We're suppressing the monoclonals that save lives right now. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. All the early therapies that work in the first 10 days, my clinics see 50,000 patients a month. These therapies work. How many of you know what a monoclonal antibody is? 2, 3. This is what I'm telling you. My parents tonight are getting monoclonal antibodies as we speak in one of my clinics because they have COVID. Would I do that if it didn't work? No. I would give my parents the best of therapy. So what I'm telling you guys is stay in your word. That's the way, that's the truth, that's the life. From the words of Jesus, nothing's changed in thousands of years. That's where the truth comes from. So, tonight, I'll just tell you how I met Anthony a couple months ago. I've been looking to get behind one. And I love this state, and I don't like the republic being on fire and burning the way it is now, as I'm sure none of you do. And so I was looking for someone to get behind, and I studied several people. And then my friend Carmen said, hey, check out this guy. And I saw this video on my phone, and I was like, he's all right. Whatever. Wasn't impressed. And I said, well, I'm going to go check this dude out. So I went out to his business. It's called Traffic. It's a marketing firm out in Irvine. And I got to know these wonderful Trimino family and their business and what they stand for and the fire and the fight and everything aligned with my biblical values. And I said, great, I can vote my Bible and get behind this guy. It wasn't this compromising, sleazy, dirty vote. I don't know if you guys are tired of having dirty votes or not, where you're like, oh, I guess so. He's terrible, but he's all we got. This is not the case this time. So I hope you guys will welcome Anthony Trimino to the stage, and we can get to know him a little bit. Come on up, Anthony.
Hello. Hello. So happy to be here.
So I wrote down a list of questions here that I thought I wanted to know, and I'm hoping you guys have some of the same questions. One of the first questions is, why would you do something like this? You have You have a successful business, a great family. Why jump into this mosh pit, this political machine that is not a fun place to be? What would cause you to do something like that?
These people sitting in the front row, and all the families and the kids and the children and the parents that I've met, all the business owners. I'm doing it because someone had to. Not just from a political perspective, but from a true conservative biblical perspective. Somebody, I feel like God wants his land back. And somebody needed to go with the understanding that we're in a spiritual battle. This is not just a political battle, this is a spiritual battle. And someone needed to wage war, spiritual war, against the powers that be that are in existence. And I felt like it was going to take a CEO. As my wife and I and our family started to look at who we would get behind, we knew that individual needed to be a CEO. We're talking about the 5th largest economy on the planet. So we're not just electing a governor, we're hiring a CEO. So the person had to be a CEO. The person had to have a family, to understand what families are going through. You look at a lot of candidates and some of them, many of them are not married, they don't have kids. Not that that's a bad thing. But when you're fighting for families and you're fighting for kids, and you have some, it's different. It's personal. So we knew that that person had to have a family, had to truly understand what families were going through. And then we also knew that that person had to have a biblical moral compass. With our churches being closed down, I think that was the final straw for a lot of people. It provoked a lot of people. And so we knew that that person had to be grounded in biblical principle. And when we looked, there was nobody to be found. Not that there aren't people that could potentially do the job, but not anybody that could do the job that needs to be done for all of us, for conservative Christians who care about business, who care about our kids, who care about our churches. And so that's why I'm doing it. But by the way, I never heard you tell that story before. That the very first time you saw a video of me, you weren't impressed. I wanted to circle back because I've literally never heard that part of the story. He's introduced me a bunch of times and he's always left that part out. So I didn't impress you first time around. So hopefully I'll do a better job with you guys today than I did with him.
First impressions aren't always honest, so,
Okay.
So I think I've heard you speak before about a specific event at your church that moved the needle, that made you think, okay, God, I feel like you're calling me to run. Do you remember a specific event like that?
It was over the course of a month. So our family was, I say we were on our way to Florida. My wife says we were never planning to go to Florida. But I was ready to move our business, move our family to Florida. And I was mentally and spiritually and physically ready to go. And she kept praying diligently that we would have a change of heart, that we would stay, that we would fight in some capacity. And so over the course of a month, God really worked on me and my faith and the calling. I remember the morning I woke up and I had lost all desire to go to Florida, and I couldn't figure it out because up until then, there was just an overwhelming excitement to leave California and to be free without masks and go into a restaurant. And I woke up one morning and I just had absolutely no desire. And so I told her, I texted her and I said, hey, I'm not saying I'm not saying we're not going, but I feel like we need to take a beat. So that whole week, we started to have conversations around what it would look like if we stayed. We started to talk about how California was in bondage. We needed to liberate California. We started to use words that we don't normally use. And so we went to church that Sunday, and the pastor, all service, was talking about how California's in bondage. We need to liberate California. And I'm like, okay. Now, we left, and she said, my wife says, you see, God's talking to you. And I said, well, if he is, he'll keep talking. So that happened. The next 3 weeks in a row, we would have intimate conversations about what that looks like. And every time we went to church, every Sunday, he would confirm it. Our pastor would confirm it using very specific words that we were using. So finally, on the 4th week, I was getting ready for church. And I said, okay, fine. I get the why. I get why you would want somebody to do this. I was actually getting ready, and I'm talking to him out loud. I said, okay, I get the why. I get why you want California. Fine. But how? How in the world am I going to pull this off? So we go to church, and pastor opens up with, you don't need to know the how, you need to know the who. And the whole sermon was about, I'll make a way in the wilderness, provide rivers in the desert, and I'm like, okay, I submit. I just submit. And so that was the beginning of the journey that we started to take to formalize me running. And it was really a process over a month that God was working on me.
Now, I also wanted to ask you, you had a specific event in your life that sort of solidified your faith and sort of set your rudder in the water. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, I was always a Christian. My mother and father separated when I was 5. My father's family was Catholic. My mother's family was always Christian. But God was always a part of my life, but he wasn't the center. He was always a part. So growing up through high school, always a part. My wife and I, we had our first child, Christian, who's not with us today. He's with us. You'll understand part of the story. He's with us. He's just not here tonight. Christian was 2 months old, and we took our first outing out of the house. Up until that point, we hadn't taken him out. And so we put him in the car. We drove down to San Diego. And we were in the car, middle of the night, looking for food, and my wife lets out the most god-awful scream I'd ever heard in my entire life. I pull the car over, she jumps out, she starts screaming and praying. I jump in the back seat to realize that Christian is not breathing. He has no heartbeat. I can't resuscitate him. I'm pinching him, I'm prodding him, I'm poking him. I'm doing everything I can to get him to respond, and he's lifeless. He's not breathing, no heartbeat. So I spend the next 3, 4, 5 minutes doing anything and everything that I could to bring him back, even giving him CPR. And as you know, an adult is not supposed to give an infant child CPR. You can blow out their lungs. There's a proper way to do it. I did not know how to do it. So I'm literally blowing air into this child, filling him up and doing anything I can. And about 4 or 5 minutes into it, I realized there was nothing more I was going to do. He was gone. And I kind of submitted to the idea that we had lost him. So in that car, she's outside the car. She's still screaming hysterically. And I just got to a point where I just submitted to the situation. So I lifted him up in the car. I picked him up, lifeless. And I just said, God, he's no longer mine. I freely submit him to you. I give him freely to you. May you receive him into heaven. And as soon as I said that, he moved. He started to breathe. He came back. She jumps in the car. We go through the streets. We find Mercy Hospital in San Diego. We spend the next 2 days in that hospital. They have him hooked up to every machine known to man. They couldn't replicate it. They couldn't duplicate it. And they couldn't diagnose him. They sent us home. But in those 2 days that we were separated from our family, we were in San Diego by ourselves, young, our child, hooked up to all these machines. We realized at that point in time, this was God's calling. This was God saying, I'm no longer happy being a part of your life. I want to be the center of your life. So that was 24 years ago. And from that moment on, we moved him from the fringe to the nucleus. He is at the center of everything that we do.
And that goes even further. When you built your house, you took that a step further in the foundation.
Yeah, we were in escrow on a house that we lost. After a 90-day escrow, we lost the house. Within an hour of receiving the keys, the lending industry buckled, and we lost the house. So we ended up finding a plot of land, and we built a home. And in the foundation of that home, under the threshold of the front door, we laid a Bible. So when I say he's the center and he's the foundation of everything we do, quite literally, was the foundation of our house, the foundation of our marriage, is the foundation of my business, and is at the epicenter of what I'm doing with this campaign.
So as you can see, it's not like a peripheral issue for Anthony. It's a center core, pivotal set of principles. And the reason why I'm here and I've been moving through his campaign is because compromise is no longer appropriate. you got to decide which team you're on. This whamby-pamby, weak-kneed, soft-handed Christian approach where we like hide our faith in the background, those days are gone. The days are coming where y'all are going to have to give an account and be bold with your faith and not be afraid. And so that's why we're here today. And I want to tell you, in the last year and a half, I've been watching this conversion in our country, where your freedoms to decide for yourself, medical and otherwise, are vaporizing. And I wanted to ask you, have you ever been to a country where their freedoms have been taken?
Yeah, so some of you may know my grandfather fled communist Cuba in the 50s. And it was always a conversation we had that my family comes from a communist country. But I never knew what that meant. I had never experienced it myself. But my wife and I started to visit Cuba over the last 4 years. We've been about 7 times. I've personally been about 7 times. And it was the first time that I was able to lay eyes on communism and how severe it is and how little you have in a communist state. And we've made friends, and I have family that live in Cuba. Cuba's dark right now. Haven't heard from them. Don't know what's going on. You're talking about a nation where you can't leave. They control every aspect of the media. Every aspect of your life is controlled. They tell you where you can work, how much money you can make, when you can eat. They ration food. And, there was a time in 2020, my grandfather has since passed away, but there was a time in 2020 where I thought, if my grandfather were walking the streets of California at some point last year, seeing churches closed, businesses closed, not being able to go into restaurants, somebody telling you, where you can go now, what you have to put into your body, he would have been confused. He would have thought he was in communist Cuba. And so, yeah, I know what it's like firsthand, and that's another reason why this is personal to me. Because you make no mistake about it, it's arrived on our shores. It's here. And in some areas, it's more pervasive than others, but make no mistake about it. Castro, 61 years ago, when he took over Cuba, he didn't strip them of their rights and their freedoms overnight. It didn't happen overnight. The first thing he did was he separated them from their guns. He did an inventory of ammunition and guns, and he took their guns away. Then he took their businesses away. And then he closed down churches, separating them from God. And so it was a slow fade, right? And you look at California, they're coming after our guns. They've separated us from our business. They closed our churches. Now they want to tell us what to put in our bodies. Communism is here. And we need to stand up and fight against it so that 61 years from now, we're not marching in our streets like they are in Cuba, carrying someone else's flag, begging for our rights back.
Do you guys remember last year when we had the who was essential and who's not essential game we were playing? And you're essential, big Walmart, but the church, no, dangerous. So I don't know who decided who's essential and who's non-essential. Does anybody feel like they're not essential in this room? Does anybody want to be in that club? My brother-in-law is an orthopedic surgeon. And he got told he was non-essential. And I would call him up and mess with him. I'd be like, hey, Robert, I hear you're non-essential.
I've been telling you that your whole life, right?
My clinics were open, slammed to the doors, busy. But I had no time for the yogurt shops and the boba teas. I was in Chino Hills and watching all these places go under that were non-essential. I was in Bakersfield yesterday, and there was a whole gym chain that went under because it was non-essential. So I'm thinking, as governor, how would you push back against this? What would you do to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Make sure it doesn't happen again. Part of the whole reason I'm running is not necessarily to go to Sacramento and to do much. It's to undo a lot of what's already been done. Everybody has this agenda. I'm going to do this, that, the other thing. Yes, there are things that need to get done. There are agenda items. But for me, I look at it as an opportunity to go and undo a lot of what has been done, unwind a lot of what's been wound up, give us back our freedoms, help push laws that will protect us in the future from things like this happening again. It's absurd. And, it takes somebody who understands the significance and importance of freedom and liberty, somebody who has family that come from a communist Cuba that know firsthand what it's like, to fight against it to ensure it never happens again.
Well, let's talk about medical freedom real quick. I'm getting calls from Kaiser nurses and all kinds of nurses saying, I don't want the jab, but my employer told me, take the jab by September 30th or you're out. Anybody in that boat out here? Couple, 2 or 3. It's not a good place you want to be in, where you're being forced to take something. If you want to take it, fine, but when we force people to take things against their will, I think we're on some dangerous ground. I think a lot of people would agree with that. What do you think, what are your thoughts on medical freedom, on masks, on vaccines, how do you think this should be handled in our society?
No matter what side of the aisle you are on, and statistically speaking, more than half of you in this room have gotten the vaccine. This is not about being anti-vaccination. This is about being pro-ability to choose what goes into your body. And this right here is the hill that we need to be prepared to die on. Because all these other things, they're important, but this right here, this is the biggest issue on the ballot right now. Finding somebody that will advocate for your medical freedom, because it's not just the shot now. It'll be the next shot, and then the booster, and then the booster, and then the booster. There are places who have moved, the goalposts, saying that, you need to be vaccinated, and vaccination means that you've received 1 shot. Oh, but now we've changed the definition. You now need to have had the booster to be qualified. Wait a minute. And as the variant comes, you're going to need the other booster. And so if we relinquish that freedom, it'll never be returned to us. And God only knows what they'll mandate on us next. And so that's the hill we need to die on. So I've been talking, day one in office, I would immediately lift the state of emergency, stripping away power from local government to impose unnecessary mandates, mask and vaccine mandates, at every level of government, state and local. We'd stop any and all conversations around vaccine passports and verification systems, because guys, that's another form of discrimination. And then we lift the mandate on our healthcare workers, our teachers, and our students so they can get back to school, and nobody has to be threatened with regards to losing their job because they're exercising their freedoms and their rights. So that's how I feel about it.
That's a good answer. I'd like to know what you'd say to pastors. There's a lot of pastors that still are closed. They didn't open their churches. What would you say to a pastor that's speaking to their flock about candidates? What kind of message would you tell them?
I would tell every pastor that people are watching. Your flock is watching. This is not the time for compromise in any area. This is not the time to stay closed, because we're teaching our congregation, we're teaching our flock, our sheep, we're teaching our kids what to do in adversity. So now's not the time to compromise. You need to open. But also, and more importantly, and specifically around the election, you have a lot of pastors who they're thinking logically about something that's spiritual. And so they're looking at logical math and traditional math. And, this is not the time to compromise. And we don't have to compromise as a church. And so I would urge all pastors to really, this is the time to show what it is to lead by the Spirit, to lead with your convictions, to lead with, your moral convictions, to vote values. This is not the time. This is not the time to compromise. We have too much at stake right now, and there's this theology being preached right now, and I'm seeing it more and more with some of the bigger churches. They're getting behind candidates, and they know that there's a compromise there, but the ideology that's being preached is, but we're not electing a Messiah. But we're not electing a Savior. So it's okay to make these compromises because we already have a Savior. We're not electing a Messiah. No, we don't. We're not electing a Messiah, but we sure in the heck don't have to compromise. And there's too much at stake right now. And so we need to vote based on the fact that this is not a general election and traditional rules don't apply. We have if you, as much as I do, want to see Gavin Newsom out of office, every one of you guys has the ability to unseat Gavin Newsom regardless of who's on the ballot running against him. Why? Because there is absolutely nobody running against Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is running against the people of California. You vote yes on question number 1, and there's a vacant chair in Sacramento. What does that mean? It means that when you get to question number 2, Gavin Newsom's name is not on question number 2. So you get to vote your conscience. You get to vote for somebody that you align with, not just politically, but on principle and core values as well. And since it's not a majority vote, it's literally a 1-to-1 ratio, whoever gets the most votes, you have a very unique opportunity to vote for somebody that will stand for the biblical principles that you come into this room and advocate for every week, every day.
Well, and Anthony's been working with the Election Integrity Project, and one of the key things that they've told us is you need to take your vote by mail ballot, take it down to the voting center, surrender that, vote paper, and that will go to the registrar's office. That is supposed to be the most secure way to vote, if I'm not mistaken, that they told us.
Yeah, there have been a ton of people, hundreds of people that have sent me DMs and pictures and video having already voted for me by mail. And if there are any of you in this room, thank you so much. However, if you haven't voted, please vote in person. Surrender your ballot. You have it, surrender it. That means take it in. They destroy it in front of you. They give you a brand new printed paper ballot. You fill that out and submit that. The moment you put your ballot in an envelope, whether you mail it in or whether you drive it in and hand it to them, a human being has to open that envelope to get to your ballot. By law, that human being has the right to look at your ballot and to determine whether or not it's legible. If that person determines that your ballot is illegible for any reason, they have the right, by law, to remake your ballot outside of your presence and submit the remade one. In San Diego County, during the last presidential election, 600,000 ballots were remade. I don't know about you, but I refuse to believe that there are 600,000 people in San Diego County that can't write their name or fill in a bubble. So, wherever you stand on voter fraud and voter integrity, the truth of the matter is that 600,000 people in the presidential election had somebody submit a ballot on their behalf that was remade. You fill in the blanks there, but we don't want that to happen. And so even though there are 8 points in the voting process where something can go bad and fraud can enter, we can't control all 8 of them, but we can minimize the risk by ensuring that we vote in person, vote on paper, and if the place that you're voting at has run out of ballots and they want you to vote on a computer, go to another voting location. Vote on paper.
I hope that's clear because it's a real important point. You can hold up these ballots and you can see what you voted for, and people can accidentally put these in the wrong receptacles. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So we just want to be smart and make sure that our election is free of fraud as much as possible. The next topic I'd like to jump to is just these variants. You guys have heard the Delta variant, and they're utilizing these things to sort of make a case for lockdown once again. If Gavin stays in the next couple weeks, they'll likely tell you that it's soaring, hospitals are full, all this kind of stuff. In your opinion, if virus is climbing in society, is that a good reason to lock down our community?
There's never a good reason to lock down our community because we're not prisoners. We live in a free society. That's what makes America, America. And so, look at what's happening in Australia, and we were talking about Canada. I mean, that could easily happen here if we don't resist, if we don't push back, if we don't have the right elected officials in place. So the key to a free society is arming people with information, good quality information, and letting them decide what's best for them. Educating people that are at high risk, giving them options on how to minimize their risk, how maybe those individuals should limit certain activities, but still leave it in their hands. But the idea that we're going to impose mandates on our churches, our businesses, consider some people essential and others not, that's not America. It's not what my grandfather came to this country to pursue. It's not the society we have chosen to live in. So I would never lock down our state again. Instead, through people like you and others, equip individuals with the information they need to make decisions that are best for them and their family.
I like that answer.
The you part, right?
That's the part I like.
That's part.
Right there. You know, anybody own a small business out here? Anybody? What do you think of the taxes so far? Real gentle on you? Real easy? No, we're the highest taxed state in the nation. We pay radical state tax, 13.5. They want to crank that up every year. What do you think of taxation in this state? What do you think we can do to help some of these folks out that are getting taxed to death?
Well, part of the reason I was leaving was because of taxes. I run a very successful company, and I was tired of seeing all of those hard-earned dollars go to a state that didn't really operate in my best interest, right? So we need to make California the most business-friendly state in the nation, and only a CEO, only an entrepreneur can actually achieve that. A politician's not going to do it. A celebrity's not going to understand how to do it. And so you need a CEO at the helm. And so what we're going to do is we're going to work to dramatically decrease, if not completely eliminate, the income tax. It's $181 billion that we would need to do that. I've already figured out how to get 90 of it through an advertising tax and a travel tax that would not affect Californians. And that's before we actually do a forensic audit of our spending, open the books, renegotiate our contracts, kill projects that are not benefiting us, like the train to nowhere, and actually start allowing you to keep more of your hard-earned dollars. So,
yeah, that's good.
There's this, I want to add this too, because you have a lot of politicians that have this funny economics. I call it the Robin Hood philosophy, where you take from the rich and you give to the poor, right? And so a lot of plans say, well, if you're making $100,000 or less, don't worry. We're gonna lower your taxes, and we're gonna punish those that are making more. All right, we're gonna take from the rich and give to the poor. What happens in a society where you punish high net worth individuals? They leave. And when they leave, what do they take with them? They take their businesses, they take their jobs, and they take their tax dollars. Who picks up the bill? The middle class. So what we need to do is we need to actually have a tax-friendly state, a business-friendly state across the board, to get businesses to come back, get businesses to stay, so the small businesses can actually thrive again. And again, it's going to take a CEO to do that.
Yeah, and if you look at a state like Texas, they have very low state income tax. Why? They have big industry there paying the majority of the bill. And when our state is driving out the Elon Musk types that are bringing billions in revenue, this is not good for the rest of us that are, don't pay as much as him, but our taxes still creep up. So I wanted to switch gears here to something I've heard a lot of people talk about in the public school system, which is critical race theory, sexuality. I'm sure in every room there's people in the public school system who may not be in favor of such things. So what are your views on it? What can you tell us? What is the best approach to this topic?
Next to vaccine and mask mandates, when I talk to parents, the thing they're most fearful of, and the reason why they have absolutely no faith in our public school system, is because of critical race theory, radical ideologies like that, sexuality, kids being taught masturbation at third grade. I spoke to a teacher that was forced to teach that kind of curriculum at third grade. It should be illegal. I mean, if Dan and I were walking down the street and we pulled a 12-year-old over and said, hey, let us talk to you a little bit. Let's talk about masturbation. Let's talk about sexuality. Let's talk about, let me tell you how you're racist by birth because of your color. We would be arrested. But both of us could walk into a classroom the next day and have that same conversation with a group of 30 kids with no supervision, and somehow that's okay. It's not okay. It should be illegal, and we would fight against it.
Good. Yeah, that's great. Now, I know a topic in the news has been Afghanistan, the way it was handled. I know a lot of military people have expressed a lot of rage, disappointment at the work we've done over 20 years. I kind of wanted to give them a sense of how you view the border, what our policies should be, how should people come into the country? What's the best way to handle that process?
Well, my grandfather came to this country legally and became a U.S. citizen. I hire people all the time that are here legally through visas, school visas, work visas. I'm 50% Mexican, 50% Cuban, 100% American because I was born here. And so it's about having the right message and the right messenger. And being that our state is, 40% Hispanic, and overall it's like 61% diverse, non-Caucasian, it takes someone like me to go out into the Hispanic community especially and talk about strong borders and strong immigration laws, which we need to have. And I often tell, when people want to, how can you say that, you're an immigrant, what do you mean strong borders? We're a sanctuary state, we should say that way. I'm like, look, even heaven has gates. Right? The idea is that, America's a melting pot. It's a welcoming country, it should be, but there's a process and a protocol. There's a right and wrong way to do it. There are people who don't share our border with land who can't get here, who want to be here, who are going through the legal process to be here. Why is it just because we share a land border with you, you're entitled to special rules? It's not fair, it's not right, and puts unnecessary tax burden on our citizens. And so I'm the right messenger for this message, and I can't wait to have this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's good because I don't think the border should be any different than any other institution where we have a system of rules that you follow to get it done. I mean, you don't say, I want to be a doctor, I will study for 10 minutes. No, there's a system. You go through years of pain, you bleed, you give them your kidneys. Like, this is how we do it. You don't just decide and do it. There is a pathway. And I think we're all happy that immigrants come, but we want them to come correctly. We want them to be screened at the border. We want to know if they have disease process, felony records. There is a process, not just pouring in unchecked all the time. So I like your philosophy on that.
Especially when we have a federal government who recently said that we're going to take potentially thousands of Afghan refugees, letting our southern border just overflow. But yet, when there was the uprising in Cuba, people were being beaten, starved, persecuted, arrested, and exiled. And some of them were ready to risk life and limb to jump on a raft and somehow get here with a 90% fatality rate for people that have attempted that journey. And for our government to say, we'll accept our southern border illegal immigrants, we'll accept the Afghan refugees, but Cubans, no. If you make it onto our shores, you're going to be sent back. It's completely absurd, but it's also political because people fleeing a communist country will become voters in this country that will vote against socialism and communism. That's the difference.
Yeah, good point. I'm looking at these ballots going, there's like 40 some odd candidates, and some of them are big players. They're out there. They've been in the media. How are you different? How do you differentiate yourself from these folks? You've given us a few things, but I wonder if you could expound a little bit more. How are you different, and how do you plan on overcoming some of these people that are so well known and visualized that maybe don't have the platform or the ethics you like, but their name recognition is so huge? How do you overcome that?
Well, the good news is we're not in a general election, so it's not about popularity. What separates me from a lot of candidates is a lot of what I mentioned in the beginning. I'm one of the few, if not the only, entrepreneur CEO that built a business from scratch. I started my company 20 years ago, a small little 200 square foot office, probably the size of one of the bathrooms here, and built that company up over the next 20 years to be what Inc. magazine called one of the fastest growing privately held companies in America. I did it 2 years in a row, and one of them was 2020. In the middle of a pandemic, when industries were collapsing, my particular industry, advertising, had basically just imploded on itself. 80% of the ad industry had gone through 3 rounds of layoffs. Many of them closed their door. In 2020, we tripled the physical size of our office. We doubled our staff, didn't lay anyone off. We were able to navigate those murky waters to have our best year in history last year. And so that's what we need in office. Somebody that's able to navigate, somebody that understands business, that understands commerce, that understands how to hire, how to fire, litigation, how to run the 5th largest economy on the planet. We also need, like I said before, we need somebody that understands what families are going through. You look at the top tier candidates. We don't have CEOs up there. Top tier meaning like media coverage. We look at, a lot of them lack family, understanding from a parental perspective what we're going through. They're not CEOs, they're not businessmen and women. And a lot of them are outspoken about their libertarian, non-conservative values. And so I would urge you to take a deep look at the candidates that are running and to identify the differences that exist between all of us and gravitate toward those that you know are going to have your best interests at heart. We don't have to compromise this time around, and we don't need to get behind the most popular candidate. If all of us were to just get behind the candidate that we felt had our best interests, that aligned with us from a moral, conservative, biblical value, we could put anyone in office. The church is strong. There's 16 million Christians in California. There's only 40 million people in California. You guys have the power to put every governor in office, and we collectively across the nation could put every president in office if we just got fired up and went out and started voting our values instead of politics.
We don't want you guys to stay home this time, is what we're saying.
I'm going to add this too, and if anyone in here is a huge advocate for the medical freedom fight, as I know a lot of people are, that pack of 46 dwindles down to a very, very small select few. Because over the last, say, 14 days, all of the mainstream media top candidates, there's 4 or 5 of them, have all come out and publicly said, we will lift the state mandate on vaccines and masks, but we will not obstruct at a local level what local municipalities do. That is critical. Make no mistake about it. Right now, I was in San Diego yesterday. There were 400 people at the Board of Supervisors fighting for medical freedom and for First Amendment rights. Prior to that, the day before or a few days before that, I was in Murrieta on a street corner with another 400 nurses, firefighters, and police officers that were trying to stop them, stop their companies from firing them because they didn't want the vaccine. They were advocating for freedom of choice. Prior to that, I was at a school fighting with parents against mandates at a school level. Just so you know, if any of those candidates get into office 6 months from now, all of those people will still be fighting those fights. There'll still be hundreds of people at school boards, hundreds of people at schools, city halls, street corners, trying to save jobs, trying to avoid getting terminated, trying to avoid having their children be forced to get the vaccine or wear a mask. Because if the governor doesn't lift it at every level of government, both state and local, nothing will change. So think about that. If you're a big medical freedom advocate, you just had 4 or 5 people crossed off your list. It's that significant, it's that important. I think that's why I said it's one of the most important, if not the most important topic on the ballot right now.
So there's 2 races going on, I'm sure you guys are aware. There's a special election, which is the recall. That's, yes, we want Gavin to do something else for a while. Sailing, gardening, anything really. The second race is, so if someone, let's say in 2 weeks we vote him out, so that creates a void, someone goes in, let's say it's Anthony, he's got a year to see what he can do. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the long range plan, because basically you get in, yay, now it's time to run. So it's like you just got in, and now you essentially have to start campaigning again for 22. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, when we first got into this race, we signed up for the general election 2022. The recall wasn't certified yet, So we were always going for the long game. We knew that we were going to have a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half runway to build momentum. And then the recall got certified. So we entered into the recall and we're on the ballot as well. This can go a lot of different ways. There's talk that he's going to be able to save his seat and that he's not going to be recalled. God help us all if that man stays in office come September, because what he will do and what he can do over the next 11 months could be irreversible. So we want to hope that he gets out. That is first and foremost. If he doesn't get out, then obviously everybody pivots to, everybody that wants to, I don't know that all 46 will, I'm certain that they won't, will pivot to the long game, 2022, and start campaigning. If Gavin gets recalled and someone does get into that role and they do have to start campaigning for next year, there's still so much that person can undo in 11 months. And it's that period of time, all of you that are concerned, just know that if you vote your conscience and you get somebody in, you get the wild card in, let's get Gavin out, let's put a wild card in there. Your safety net is that come next November, you can vote that person back out. It's a general election, so we can vote that person back out and we can try again. But the goal is to get him out. That is what we're hoping for and praying for. But again, those medical freedom advocates out there, we have to be careful. Because if we exchange Gavin Newsom for somebody that's not going to fight, that's the scary, irreversible part that I'm talking about. And there are jobs at stake. There are schools at stake. Our children are at stake. And so we need to be very selective with who we put in there. So vote yes, vote your conscience, put somebody in that's going to advocate for our families. And that's the optimistic view of what could happen.
Yeah, so also, I don't know if you guys know, we've learned through this pandemic how powerful these governors are. You look at Kristi Noem at South Dakota, kept it open. You look at California, closed down. You look at New York, hard close, doing terrible. I talked to Shannon Grove, who's one of our senators, and I said, Shannon, if we get somebody else in for the governor, how many positions could we undo? And she said between 2,500 and 3,000 people could be fired immediately. Now that's the good news. Now you gotta hire, train, and fill the void. You can't just pull in Afghanistan. You gotta get in there and do something. So the reason why we need a CEO, I'm a CEO, he's a CEO. The reason why you need a CEO is because we've hired and fired thousands of people. We have systems, hundreds of employees, admin people. We are used to hiring, firing, restructuring, training, and going. We got a $3.5 trillion economy. You need somebody who understands numbers, people, money, how to move, how to make it succeed. Anthony knows how to do that. He does marketing. He knows how to move people and systems and maximize this state. California is the leader of the free world. There is no close. Everything's bigger in Texas but their GDP, which is half of ours. So what I'm telling you is California is a super critical state. You guys hold the keys to the kingdom, in my opinion, of what the rest of the country will follow. I could give you 5 examples of policy that was started in California for truckers and firefighters and goes all across the country. So what you do in 2 weeks matters. It's huge. So please understand that it's super important to get out there and vote. There's a lot at stake in Sacramento. There's a lot of people entrenched and ingrained in there, and it's going to take us years to sort of claw that back. So I just wanted to mention that so you guys know what's at stake. One other thing I wanted to talk about was free speech. I learned the hard way. Back in April, I did some videos, 70, 80 million people saw them. We started getting shadow banned. We started getting yanked. We were thrown on BitChute. You couldn't find us. Do you have any thoughts, Anthony, on free speech, what it means to us, how do we protect it?
Yeah, so yesterday in San Diego, there were 400 people fighting for free speech. Basically, the Board of Supervisors had said that any speech against the vaccine mandates was misinformation and should be illegal. That's what they were fighting. They were fighting for our First Amendment rights, something that you can't even imagine. If you're outside this country, seeing Americans fight for their freedom of speech is absurd. I mean, it's a fundamental aspect of being an American. What's happening in Cuba is a byproduct of not having free speech. You can't speak against the government. You can't, have free thought. You're not a free thinking society. So we need to preserve our freedom of speech at all costs. And it doesn't matter what your opinion is on anything and whether we differ and have heated debates. The bottom line is we should all be able to speak our mind. California is like the tech capital of the world, and our tech censorship is extremely pervasive. We have tech companies in California that can shut down the president from being able to speak. I mean, just like DeSantis did in Florida, we would impose strict restrictions against that. We would fight against the tech companies. We would fine them, and we would, if need be, run them out of California because they cannot operate like that. We need to protect our First and Second Amendment at all costs. And a part of our First Amendment is our right to worship, which was attacked, which was taken from us. It wasn't just the idea. Yesterday they were fighting to keep it, but last year they actually were successful in taking it, except for a select few churches that decided to hold ground and stand up and fight. So we need to protect our First Amendment at all costs because that's what makes us America.
Yeah, I think I've been saying for a while, the Republic is on fire, and I hope people realize this. Like we have used this summer, we haven't taken vacations, we have been burning the midnight oil, trying to tell people, listen, this is not the time to mess around. This is the time to be serious. Do what you can in your arena. People say, well, I don't have this platform. You have vocal cords, you have a neighbor, you have a coworker, speak to them. Talk about the truth, and stand up for what you believe. This is the time for it. So I hope you guys are doing that.
It's kind of like the rule of compound. If 10 people told 10 people who told 10 people, in 7 days, we'd reach 100 million people. Almost triple the population of California. So you guys have more power than you think. It's not just about you. It's about activating your network, your friends, your families, your neighbors, your churches. Get them active, get them involved. That rule of compound is how we win this thing.
Would you mention, you have not been a traditional guy. You have taken untraditional pathways in your business, untraditional pathways in this political journey. Can you tell us why that's important and how that sort of meshes with your faith a little bit?
Yeah. When we started this journey, we were told, you're going to need to meet with political strategists. You just have to. There's a process, a protocol, a way to win. So we sat down and we spoke to people, political strategists that got Schwarzenegger elected in the recall and then reelected, people that have worked on national campaigns. They'd sit down, they would talk with me, offer their services. And it's really the same, it's the same story. It's a very traditional way of thinking. Look, you're going to need X amount of millions of dollars. I mean, they have it to the penny. It's like $4.9 million. You're going to need these affiliations. You're going to need these endorsements. This is how you run your campaign. This is what you need to do. This will get you in office. And you think about it and you're like, if I went that traditional path, paid the money to have one of these strategists consult, and we made it into office, and I stood on that stage one day, there would be absolutely no room for God. A political strategist will say it was their strategy that got me elected. A donor would say it was their money that got me elected. An endorser would say, hey, it's my endorsement, my platform, my name that got you elected. I may even stand up there and say, well, it was my hard work and my charm and my charisma that got me elected. There's no room for God. But we've taken and decided intentionally to take a very non-traditional path. And God has taken us through a very non-traditional path. And the success that we've had and the momentum we're building is through a very non-traditional path. And the reason I believe that it's meant to be that way is because when we do get to Sacramento, and I do stand on that platform, there will be no room for anybody but God.
Yeah. And how many political candidates are you going to hear say that? They're going to use their ego. They're going to use their business. There's no room for God. They have these narcissistic, musings. There's no room for God. And we've called this campaign, we meet once a week, and we call it loaves and fishes because we're looking for a miracle. We've called it David and Goliath. He's spoken of how he's, he has this cool analogy he does for that. I don't know if you want to share that.
A couple analogies I use, but I'll use the whisper one right now because, I think it's in 1 Kings, it talks about how they were waiting for God. They were listening for God. They were looking for God. And, there was a wind that was strong enough to shake the rocks, right? To shatter stones. It was strong enough to shatter stones. And they were looking for God in that, and he wasn't there. And they were looking for God in the fire that consumed the mountain, and he wasn't there. And they were looking for God in the earth that shook, and he wasn't there. How did God show up? He showed up in a whisper, in the least likely place. Not in the big pomp and circumstance, not in the obvious, in the whisper. And so when you think about a traditional campaign, especially with some of these people that get a lot of mainstream media, the media is the ground shaking. The endorsements and the money, that's the fire that consumes the mountain. That's in the obvious places, but that's not where God is. God is in the whisper. And what we've created is a coalition of people from San Diego to San Francisco that have all whispered about what we're doing, that have told somebody who's told somebody who's told somebody. They show up places and they're like, I had never heard of you till a week ago, but somebody whispered about you. Somebody told me about you. And so this whole campaign is based on God showing up in the least likely places. He's not going to show up in that pomp and circumstance. He's going to show up in the least likely places. And you're talking about the David analogy, which is when you think about how God works, right? God could have chosen anybody to defeat Goliath. Could have chosen a king, a very notable, famous king. Could have chosen the most worthy warrior, the obvious, the tallest, the strongest warrior in the army. Could have chosen any of those. But he didn't. There's this little kid out there in a field killing lions and bears, tending to his father's flock, who goes to the battlefield just to bring supplies to his brothers. And he's like, what's with the long faces? What's wrong with all you people? Well, there's a giant over there that's, coming against Jerusalem. It's like, who is this giant that he would come against God's people? And he was provoked, right? And so he goes and he says, I'll go. I'll battle the giant. And so what do? Immediately, they start to give him the tools that they think he needs to fight that fight. They give him the shield, the breastplate, the helmet, the sword. And what does David do? He shakes it off. He says, I don't need that. That's not how I fight my battles. And what did he go into battle with? He went into battle with his slingshot, his faith, and 5 smooth stones, right? That's all he went into battle with. And he fought the battle the way God knew he would fight the battle, with the tools that he had, because that's how that battle needed to be won, in the least likely way.
That's right.
And so the other day, I was at a church speaking, and at this point, I brought my family up, because Elijah, Christian, Jen, Cameron, and Nico, they represent my 5 stones. Those are my 5 smooth stones I go into battle with. My faith, my slingshot is what he's equipped me with, my experiences, and my family. That's how we do battle. That's what fighting this battle through Christianity, through biblical principle looks like. That's how we win back this state for God. It doesn't look like the traditional way. It doesn't look like a normal fight, but that's what gets it done. That's what kills the giant. And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think that resonates with a lot of people. And I've reached out to a lot of pastors, and I'm so thankful for you guys, letting us come and letting us share this with you. But I've reached out to pastors like Tim Thompson, who, I don't know if you guys saw this bald, crazy pastor, standing for freedom out in the street, fearless. And he's come to really like Anthony's platform, and so many pastors have said, this is a non-compromise. I can vote my Bible. I don't have to have a greasy vote where I walk away thinking, oh, Lord, I didn't want to vote for him. So you can keep a clean conscience. I wonder if you could just share a little bit of your experience with pastors and the support and even your church, the kind of response you're getting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think God is doing a lot. When we started this journey and people asked, how are you going to get this done? Obviously faith. But I knew it was going to happen within the church and within the minority community, 2 distinct groups that I can relate to very well. And so I knew, it was going to happen in the church. It's going to happen. And so people around me, my wife included and others, thought, okay, church, so let's go after these pastors that have big platforms and big churches, and they're on the front lines of the political fight, and let's get them to endorse us. Logical thinking, right? Even though we're talking biblical people, these are Christians, it's using the secular part of who we are, right? And it made sense. So they go out and talk to some of these pastors, and there was a little bit of resistance. And there was a little bit of a gap, and we weren't really finding our footing. They didn't know who I was. They didn't really know our platform, but there was this resistance. And those around me started to get a little weary, a little frustrated. Like, wait a minute, God was supposed to use the church. What's going on? Like, why are we not getting calls back? Why are we not being invited? And so I was in the car one day, and I was talking to God. And I was like, okay, you said the church. You said the church. Why are we getting so much resistance from the church? And he just immediately, he spoke to me. And he says, who's my church? Is it a senior pastor, or is it the body? And it's then that I knew we would get pastors, we would get senior pastors, and we have. But I knew that what he meant was it was going to be you guys. It was going to be the body. It was going to be the masses, the church body coming together and advocating for what was good and what was just and what was right. And so we have now built a huge coalition of people in churches where even the senior pastor is deviated and gone one way, and a huge part of the congregation is sitting there scratching their head saying, we don't get this. And I call it, there's the spirit of compromise is waging war against our faith right now. And that's happening at the church. The spirit of compromise is waging war against our faith. And so we're seeing that happen, and we're seeing congregations break from, senior pastors, not from the church, but break from kind of where they stand on this issue. And it's pretty incredible. But we've seen an amazing show of support, not just in the church body, but from some pastors that have said, you know what, I have discernment, I pray in the Spirit, and I feel like this is not the time to compromise. And they've come along, they've walked along with us on this journey, they've supported us, they stand with us, and I truly believe that we're going to see a major shift happen where a lot of this is going to be exposed. There's going to be a lot of light shed. People are going to pivot because I believe this is God's campaign, and I believe that people are going to understand it. That spirit of compromise is going to be exposed, and we're going to cleanse. We're going to cleanse the church, and that's happening right now in a pretty magnificent way.
Yeah, and I think a key point too is we're all going to give an account of our behavior, and you're going to have to defend your life someday. Why did you do what you did? Who did you support? Why did you support? For instance, if you voted for our president right now, you can enjoy what's happening. These elections have consequences. Governors have consequences. The pro-life movement has consequences. And when you vote, you will give an account. Make no mistake, you are part and parcel to these decisions. This is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. We, the people, are the ultimate authority in a republic. You are we the people, not the person we elect. They are supposed to represent you. And when they don't represent you, we are, by order of this country, to remove these people. That is our duty, that is our right, and that is our privilege for now. And I hope to God that we do that this time around.
Now look, I'm not telling you that God is telling you to vote for me. That's between you and God. You figure that out. You pray about it. Vote your conscience, whatever that means. But building off of what Dan just said, we as believers, there's this, we all grow up understanding one day we're going to stand before God and be accountable for all the things we've done. We've all heard that. He just said it. My kids at a young age understood that. We're going to stand and be accountable for all the things we've done. I believe that there's another side of that coin nobody talks about. I think we're also going to stand before God and be held accountable for the things we did not do. the things that we had an opportunity to do and didn't, the lives we could have touched and didn't, the decisions we could have made and didn't. I think we'll be held accountable for that too. So don't compromise. And again, it's not about voting for me. Vote your conscience. If there's a better candidate out there and God leads you to that person, do it. But we're going to be held accountable for the things we've done and the things we did not do in this life. So don't add to that list by not allowing God to lead you to make the decision that's best biblically and where you feel led to make, despite what there was one. Somebody once recently, this one pastor recently posted. I was incredibly shocked by it. The post said, "Don't let your heart get in the way of your mind." As they were supporting a candidate that I believe they're making a compromise over. Don't let your heart get in the way of your mind. I mean, Scripture says, like, do not lean on your own, completely opposite. Do not lean on your own understanding. It's like a completely opposite theology. So I would just encourage you to pray about this and see where God leads you and cast your vote where you feel its best place, because you only have one, and it's that important.
So a final question here, and then I hope we can just pray for you a little bit. Let's say we get the current leader out, you get in. Talk to us about your first 3 big moves. What would be your first 3 top priority moves that we could all understand?
Well, I already said it. Day 1 is lift the state of emergency. No more mandates, no more vaccine mandates, no more mask mandates, no more talk about vaccine verification, no more talk about vaccine passports, and no mandates on our teachers, healthcare workers, and students. 3 things, day 1. Day 2, then we start looking at taxes, homelessness, and energy and water and all that other stuff. But I think that is the most critical. It's not about what I'm going to do on day 1, but what I'm going to undo on day 1 that's most important.
David, will you come up and just, if you guys will join us and just stand and pray with Anthony here and just, pray that he would have wisdom, he would have discernment to know what to do, where to go, that his campaign would be guided, and we would be, stewards of the word. If you guys want to come up too,
well, my wife,
family come up.
Let's have Jen come up.
Yeah, Jen come up. And
She's in this battle with me. This is my wife, Jennifer.
Come on. And so if you guys don't mind.
My daughter Cameron and my son Elijah.
These are part of the Rolling Stones. There's 4 of them here. Not all of them are here.
Smooth stones.
Smooth stones.
All right.
So this is the support structure part of it for Anthony, and it's been such a joy, honestly, to get to know these people and to fight alongside them. So I just want to pray. If you guys would pray with me and agree with me, I really would like to see God's hand move mightily. So let's pray. Lord, you are powerful, you are mighty, Lord, you are the creator of all. And I pray for wisdom for Anthony and for his family. Lord, if your calling is for them to lead this state, I pray that you would work miraculously in the next weeks and months, Lord, and you would just make the pathway so clear so that we know that no one else could have caused this but you, Lord. This is not a human effort. And I just pray for discernment for Anthony as he answers questions and deals with people, that he would maintain his integrity. He would lean on your word every day, Lord, and he would not compromise. If you allow him to get the position of governor, that he would hold his position, he would not waver, he would do the things we speak of now, and he would bring our state and our country toward a position of freedom. And Lord, we love you, we honor you, and we pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you guys for coming tonight.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you.
How about that? Let's thank these guys for taking the time out to come all the way down here and to stand up for what they believe in and not compromising. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Amen. You're dismissed.
Taking all the wrong ways out. Never saw you coming, stopping me in my tracks, keeping me from the long way down. Doesn't matter, just just how many